We are almost back. Okay, there we go. Chat's open. Virtual camera's going. Let me check Facebook. Shows that I'm live. Okay, that's good. That's good. Let me delete this one real quick. It's easy enough for me to do. Delete. Move to trash. One more thing, and we'll get started. Seriously. I kid you not. Hang with me. Hang with me. Don't leave. Don't leave. I know you're wanting to leave. Okay, that's right. No, I didn't mean to do that. Get away from me. Move to trash. Move. All right, I won't do the last one. Looks like we're up and going everywhere. Let's get my little stream deck ready. Uh-oh. Oh, yeah, that's that. That's not what I'm looking for. Let's go back here. There we go. All right, we're ready to go. Let's get started. Welcome to Theology Unplugged. I'm Michael Patton, and this is our 29th session of Through Theology in a Year. I hope you're enjoying this. I hope you're going back and listening to previous episodes. Now, you don't have to. Each one of these, you can just pop in and hang out if you'd like, but you can always go back and start and go through the entire year. We tried to make them bite-sized enough, under an hour, around 30 minutes to an hour, to where for every single day at this time or anytime during the day, you can check your podcast, check Spotify, check any of your podcast catchers. They should have it. If not, you just have to search around. We're on Spotify, we're on Apple, and we're on the YouTube one or the Google one. So you can find us in all those places. You can also find us on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter. So various places to find us. If you wanted to watch us live and to see, because I do have slides that I go through and I explain the slides. Anybody who knows me, you know that I love slides. I am a left-handed person and I am a left-handed thinker. Whatever that means, I do think differently and I do teach and present differently because I learn differently. And so maybe I'm teaching to some of you guys who are looking for a teacher such as this. But one of the things I've told every time I introduce this show, I call it Theology Unplugged. And some of you don't know what Unplugged is. This is the podcast that I've been doing since 2005. I used to teach at Stonebriar Community Church. I taught a series that I talk about all the time. As a matter of fact, that's what I'm updating here, called the Theology Program. You can find the Theology Program at credocourses.com, credocourses.com. Just search for the Theology Program. But you can find that. It's a big program, but after each time I would teach it, we would sit around as a class, or I would sit around with my buddy, and we would talk about the class. How did it go? What do you think we should have left in there? After class questions, kind of a very informal time. And I always thought that time was the best time. The informal, the unplugged, whatever you're doing. And I mean, you got to do presentations. You got to get the content in there. But I like the relaxed time. I don't like performances. That has a lot to do with what we're going to be talking about today. I don't like inauthenticity. I mean, whenever I'm teaching, one of the things that I always try to do, teaching or preaching, I want you to see me. I don't want you to see the version of me that is filtered through modern preachers or the way people are today just because they're popular. It's just me. You get up here and you talk and you show your own passion, and hopefully that drives whatever it is you do. And I hope that that is part of the Unplugged experience, doing Theology Unplugged, because it's very important to me. It's very important to me that you see through the camera, you see through everything, and you get a glimpse of me, and see what I'm like, because you might find identity in that. And in that, you may also learn along with me, learn the same way I learn. But anyway, that's a long preview to tell you about why it's called Theology Unplugged. I like to unplug. Sometimes it's not as unplugged as I like, but I like to unplug, and we've been doing this for a long, long time. Have a lot of guests on previous ones. If you go back, you can go back and, gosh, we got so many, all the way from 2005. So we're one of the earliest theology podcasts that is out there. I had a long break where I didn't do quite so many, 1 or 2 a year for a few years whenever I was hooked on opioids, which was not a good time in my life, but that was a while back. But so you'll see a long break. You might even see me a few times on opioids while I'm doing a podcast. You'll probably be able to tell. You can't see me, luckily, but if you would have been sitting around the table with me and Sam Storms and the other guests that we had, you would see that I didn't look good. I just didn't get any sleep. Anyway, that's enough about me. I didn't mean to share all that. No relevance whatsoever, except for that was really unplugged. But anyway, so today, well, first of all, don't forget, click on that if you want to, if you believe in here's a couple things. If you believe in what I'm doing and you like this podcast and you want other people to see it, number one, share it, like it, do whatever it is that you're supposed to do on whatever format you are on right now. It really does matter. It makes a difference. It helps the algorithm. So please share it. Share this right now. Share the live version. Share whatever you can. That would be wonderful. But another thing is to be able to keep up and to support. This is what you do. You go there, my Patreon /C Michael Patton. Please, if you're enjoying this, if you can, that is great. It's where I make a living. It's what I do. This is one of the primary things I do. It's not the only thing I do. There's lots of stuff that's in our ministry. You'll learn about it if you become a member of Patreon. Now, I'd love for you to become a supporter, a financial supporter. I need it. But if not, just follow. Just check us out. Follow. Go there. It's good. Okay. We are continuing our session. We're still on epistemology, which is, how do you know? Epistemology. How do you know? It's a subject within philosophy and theology that asks that question. How do we know what we know? This is a really good thing for those of you who are apologetic minded, because in apologetics, what apologetics is it's a discipline. You've got epistemology, then you got apologetics. But apologetics is a discipline of defending the Christian faith. It's not apologizing for it. It's not saying you're sorry. It is defending the faith. And in apologetics, you really have to have your epistemology down and know how you know what you know. Not why do you know, but how do you know? What's the method of knowledge? How do you acquire knowledge? How sure are you? What are your sources for acquiring knowledge? And it's very important that we start at ground level with nothing. We don't have any assumptions, and that's what I want you all to do, is as we're going through this, don't have assumptions. Don't even assume the Bible, because we haven't built towards that yet. We're going to build towards it, and we'll build that into our epistemology, and we'll tell you why and how it affects our how do we know question, but we haven't gotten there yet. So right now we're still going through the history of epistemology and looking at why we're in a postmodern world, why everybody acts, looks, thinks differently today than they did for the last, really a long, long time, since the Enlightenment, since the 16th century, 17th century. We had a kind of a stable worldview, or a stable epistemology, how people knew, and it was rationalism. People used their minds. People used their empiricism, what they saw, and that put it together in a very rational way, and that's how we knew things. Now today, people don't trust anything. People don't trust you. They don't trust me. I don't blame them. I really don't, because I'm very much caught up in this postmodern ethos, this postmodern mindset, this culture that is built on doubt, discouragement, and then many times, depending upon where you go, despair. It's called the age of despair because people don't trust anybody. You think they do, but they don't. You do not automatically have people's trust like you did 100 years ago or 50 years ago, whenever we were in smaller communities, both locally and from the standpoint of electronics now, electronically, and from the standpoint of even phones. Whenever those were invented, started changing things. But beforehand, you were isolated to a small community, and you weren't really exposed to the broader world and things outside that community. And so there was no question about that community. It was very easy for you to say, I know this because this is the only way it is. But now that we're exposed to the entire world, we're a global culture at the touch of a button. We can get anywhere in the world. Now we're asking questions. Now we're confused. Now we're in an age of everything is a conspiracy theory, no matter what side you're on, because nobody trusts anybody else at all. And the problem is there's so much not to trust. There really is. I mean, if you were to go out there, I wouldn't say the majority of people's worldviews and philosophy you should trust. But the majority of them you should not trust. Now, we trust people in general. When we're driving down the road, we trust that they're going to stay on the right-hand side of the road if you're in America. And, we trust them to stop at stop signs. That's not what I'm talking about. There is a social contract we have with people that we think, generally speaking, they're not lying. But what we're doing is we're saying we don't it's not that we think you're lying all the time. It's that we think you know something you don't know. And therefore, we feel sorry for you. That's the postmodern mindset. The modernist looks at the postmodernist who doesn't, you remember the modernist, very rational, looks at the postmodernist and says, this postmodernist is just stupid. How can the truth be there is no truth? That kind of stuff. That's just dumb, and they can write them off real easily. But the postmodernist looks at the modernist and says, you naive little boy. You naive little girl, and pat you on the head because they see you as being built into a system, a worldview, a meta-narrative, as we called it, a meta-narrative to that you're duped. You're a duped person, and whatever you think, no matter how bad you think of me, no matter how much you think you're right, I just pat you on the head and I say, nice little modernist. That's how the relationship's going. We're trying to figure out how that happened. We have. Go back a few sessions and start that if you want to. We went through the whole history and why. We've even empathized with postmodernism, why it is they are the way they are. Now we're looking at how this has affected the church, Christian epistemology. As we step in and we step back into our church and say, let's look at the broad picture of the church the last 30, 40 years. What has happened? And I'm telling you, so much has happened. It is crazy how different churches have become and the church in general is becoming. And we have to ask the question, is this right or wrong? You might we're all against change. We don't like it. I don't like change. Anytime my wife goes in and starts painting the living room, which she does all the time, she loves change, or brings in a new piece of furniture, used to stress me out a whole lot. Now I've gotten used to it, been married for 27, 28 years, 27 or 28. I don't know, somewhere right in there, but been married for a while now. It doesn't bother me so much, but I don't like change in general. Nobody really does. And the thing is that we are going through a massive change and we don't really like it. And we think automatically just because it's change, it's wrong. It isn't. We have to evaluate it. We're Christians. We're ones who think with integrity. We're ones who approach the how do you know question. When we say, how do you know, we approach that and we say, I want to do it with integrity because I believe in God. And I believe that God created the mind. And if he created the mind, then that is something that you and I are to use in order in such a way that we honor him. So we look at this question and we don't automatically think it's wrong. It could be. Maybe the postmodern church is the best church. Maybe that's what we need to be grabbing a hold of. Or maybe not. Maybe the change is wrong. That's the question. See, culture itself is amoral. What I mean by that is culture is neither good nor bad in and of itself. You know, whether cars turn into electric cars, that is all moral. Whether or not people start liking a new type of music, that is all moral. I know we like to assign a lot of morality to these things, just like I assign that. Here, I'll tell you the truth. It is to me very wrong to go electric on Camaros. Now, they've gotten rid of the Camaro, and I like that more than going electric. If they go electric on Camaros, that is one thing that is absolutely wrong. Okay? That's not all moral. Okay? But other things, going electric in general, that's all moral. You know, there's all moral things, and then you connect it to other things and try to figure out why we're doing it, whether it's the best option. But culture itself is all moral, so we got to keep that in mind as we move through here. And God can use culture. He often uses culture. He often uses culture to shake us up. Sometimes the outside culture, we have found, is more godly than the church. They shame us. People outside the church can shame us. And that doesn't make whatever their worldview is right. It just means we are shamed and we need to advance. We need to get better. And the church, if you're like me, a Protestant reformer, you believe that the church is semper reformanda, always reforming. Not only in the 16th century did we reform and become better, but the church said, you got to keep in mind, we've got to always reform. We've got to always get better. We've got to always move forward. And the assumption there is that we can move forward. I know that's a whole lot to introduce this subject of Christian epistemology and how postmodernism is affecting the church, but this is such an important section. We're going to go through it this time and probably next time and maybe even a third time because there's so much to talk about. How postmodernism is affecting the church. Now, we're going to have to talk about what is postmodernism again. Let me just review that some, if I can. Let's go here to talk about just a basic definition. Let's see if I can get this back up. Okay, what is the postmodern view of truth? That's the first question. What is the postmodern view of truth? Let's start again. We remember this term we use, relative view of truth. Truth is a perspective reality that exists in the perspective of the individual or group, and that perspective is grounded in time. In other words, remember, there is no grand narrative. There is no one big truth that somebody has a hold of, and that is the truth. That is the postmodern worldview. What else? The law of non-contradiction. Here's okay, I've already said this before. Let me say this again because it's really, really important. Here's sometimes the way we define postmodernism when we move on. The law of non-contradiction does not apply. Remember, what is the law of non-contradiction? That A can equal non-A at the same time in the same relationship. The law of non-contradiction says something can be what it is and something else at the same time in the same relationship. Red can be red and be blue at the same time in the same relationship. God can exist and not exist at the same time in the same relationship. That is where you say there's no such thing as truth at all. Now, that is the way we sometimes define postmodernism. So we say, here's the way they believe. They believe in statements like, my wife has never been married, or a triangle can have 4 sides. Well, it cannot. That's a contradiction, we would say. Well, that's not really what postmodernists are saying. Postmodernists think differently. They think something like this. The key motto, the truth cannot be known. Remember the key motto for modernism, man can know all truth? Well, the key for postmodernism is the truth cannot be known. Or better, here's a better way. I like this more. The truth cannot, the truth cannot be known with certainty. So that's the key. It's not that there's no truth. Don't get them wrong. Don't get this culture wrong. You're going to misunderstand it, and you're not going to be able to engage it well. But people don't think there's no such thing as truth. People just think that nobody really has access to that grand meta-narrative, that one truth that applies to everything. Therefore, religion is one of the most looked down upon aspects of culture today to the postmodern, even the idea of religion, because what is religion? It's a grand meta-narrative under which you interpret everything. And then Christianity is placed as one of those religions, and then all of a sudden, Christianity is irrelevant to the postmodern. Glad you like it, patting you on the head. Glad you like it. Glad it helps you, but don't act like I have to ascribe to some big picture idea. It's not even that they don't believe. It's not even that they don't believe in God or something like that. It's just we don't have access to him with any degree of certainty. You're not really sure. Remember what Rene Descartes did beforehand. Here's what Rene Descartes said. I want to know everything indubitably, without a doubt, to such a degree that when I know make a statement of knowledge, I'm going to build it from the ground up, and every time I say something that I believe, it will be indubitable, that it can't be wrong to such a degree that just like a triangle always has three sides. It can't be wrong. Why? Because by definition, a triangle has three sides. So that statement can't be wrong. What Descartes wanted was indubitability. That's what he sought for. And that was both the gift and his failure, because indubitability is not something that is possible for man. We cannot be indubitable, but here's the deal. Do you really need to be indubitable to be sure about something? Is an indubitability required for your belief? That's the question. Is indubitability required for your belief? Do you in order to believe something, do you have to be absolutely certain that it's true? No, you just have to have warrant. You have to have enough. You have to be certain enough. You have to have justification for it. We'll talk more about that later. But what is the key word for the postmodernist? The postmodernist is dubitability. We doubt everything and stay in that state of doubt, not in order to, like Rene Descartes, figure out what is the absolute truth and become indubitable. We don't doubt everything in order to come to some meta-narrative. We doubt everything just because that is a state of existence that we must exist in. Okay, that's where we're at. Now, what is the outlook on man? The outlook on man is remember what last time, I don't know if I put this, I may not have even put it, but remember I think I said, outlook on man for the modernist is man as something on a stick. I don't even know if that's an actual saying, but Chuck Swindoll used to say that. He probably still does in sermons. Whenever somebody was prideful and thought they were something great, he goes, man, they think there's something on a stick. You know, the way he would say it, something on a stick. So if you think you're something, that's it. You think you're something on a stick. Well, to the modernist, man was something on a stick, but to the postmodernist, man is something on a stick that melted. Okay? Something on a stick that melted. Chuck, you can use that if you want. You can take credit because basically it's yours, you know. It was bound to melt. Okay, so here's what I want to talk about for the rest of our time, because I've already taken most of my time preparing to talk about this. But now that we're here, here's the question we have to start wrestling with. What does the church look like in a culture that looks like this? The culture looks like this. This is a fact. Now, here's what a lot of people do. They say, well, let's get them back to modernism, because that was a lot easier. We had figured modernism out. We could stand toe to toe with any modernist with our faith and show how our faith is perfectly rational. We got really, really good at that. And we did. I mean, from the standpoint of history, we could stand up against any modernist, and we could show how the modernist has to be consistent and believe in God and believe in Christ. And we had all kinds of apologetics, and those apologetics were set up for modernists. But we're not in a modernist world anymore. I'm not saying people don't think that way. Don't let me set that aside and make sure I have that as an important caveat. There are modernists, and everybody has some degree of modernist thinking. But in general, people think you don't know what you're talking about, even if you think you do. And it doesn't matter because we're not on a search for a grand meta-narrative. That's not what they're looking for anymore. Okay, so in this context, we move in and we say, what is the church doing? What does the church become? What does religion become? And here's some of the things, some of the new terms. Remember, I told you there's going to be new terms. We're not going to go around those. It's important. You need to learn these terms, so I make an apologetic for these terms every time. You need to learn them, but I'll explain them. So easy enough, right? So the first one here, the religious spin on postmodernism, is this: universalism. Universalism is the belief that all people, good and bad, will eventually make it to heaven. All roads lead to Rome. That's easy enough. It's a universal. Everybody's going to make it to God. All meta-narratives are sufficient to bring us before God. That's important, right? All meta-narratives. That's postmodern, because that's problem solved. If we're not really sure, and everybody's got a different truth, and now we have access to all the meta-narratives in the world, here's my new meta-narrative, that all meta-narratives are good. That's universalism. Notice it's a meta-narrative, though, okay? We can't get around that. We can't get around having a meta-narrative no matter what. There is no such thing as meta-narratives. It is a meta-narrative. Anyway, so you've got universalism. Then you've got pluralism. Pluralism is the belief that there are many ways to God that are equally valid. Excuse me, I get these mixed up. Universalism is that everybody's going to heaven. If I didn't say that, maybe I did. Universalism is that everybody makes it to heaven eventually. Pluralism, on the other hand, is that all religious beliefs are equally valid. So it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody's going to get to heaven, but it means no matter what religion you're on, that is a valid path to God. Follow it with all of your heart. Follow it truly, and that is one aspect of God. Pluralism is more like universalism, just everybody's going to end up there somehow. Pluralism is just like the old saying, the Indian proverb about everybody feeling on an elephant. One person feels on his side, and it is blindfolded people. One person feels on his side, and he says it's a wall. One person grabs his tail, and he says it's a rope. Another one grabs his trunk and says it's a hose, a fire hose. Another one grabs his leg and says it's a tree. Now, which one is it whenever they take their blindfolds off? Well, they're all right. That's what pluralism is. It says everybody's right, and they describe one aspect of God. The problem is that runs head to head in many ways, in many cases, against the law of non-contradiction. And remember, I said postmoderns don't really deny the law of non-contradiction. They just say that we cannot fit everything into it and come up with a indubitable answer. But when we're talking about pluralism, that's the problem. We come in and we say, are we supposed to accept something that is self-contradictory? If Christianity says, Christ says, I am the way, the truth, and life, and no man comes to the Father but by me, and then the Buddha says the path to enlightenment is this way, and Jesus was very exclusive, but they're both right. Well, if they're both right, then Jesus is wrong. You see what I'm saying? But this is the response. This is how we go. Pluralism. And then you've got another one called syncretism. Syncretism is an interesting one, and it's very, very popular, and it just goes on in the background. It's kind of one of the unsaid responses to postmodernism. Syncretism is this: the assimilation of differing beliefs and practices. And what you're doing is you think of it as a smorgasbord. You go to a smorgasbord and you're walking, you're choosing your foods, okay? And you choose a little bit from Christianity, you choose a little bit from Roman Catholicism, excuse me, I don't mean to separate those, but from Buddhism, from Islam, from all the different religions, and you put those together and you make your own mixture of food. and your own mixture of religion. That is syncretism. That is very popular within a postmodern world. And then finally, another one that I want to end by talking about for a little bit, and this is the most popular, I guess, if you were to say, Michael, in the church, Michael, in a more conservative church, because these would be more liberal churches. We've already kind of set those aside. They've always been universalistic. They've always been pluralistic. But what is happening with the conservative church? What is going on there with regard to postmodernism? How are they reacting? Well, I'm just going to give you one way today, because next week we're going to go through lots and lots of stuff with this regard. How does the conservative church today, how is it interacting? And all we're doing is observing, right? Because we've got to build, we're kind of like, remember, this whole class is about putting all the pieces on the table, okay? And understanding those pieces, but not necessarily putting them together yet, and not necessarily using them all. But this is part of the pieces. What is the conservative church doing in the postmodern world? And one of the things you will find theologically is inclusivism. Inclusivism is the belief that salvation is only through Christ. Okay, stop right there. Salvation is only through Christ. It's not as if there's many ways. It's not as if there's many valid paths. Okay, there's only one way. So you take the passage, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but by me. Inclusivists believe in that. Acts 4:12, there is no other name under heaven that has been given among men by which we must be saved. Inclusivists believe that. However, what they would say is the belief that salvation is only through Christ, but, here's the big one, but Christ may be revealed in other religions. In other words, let's say you are you live in South America, and you have one of these tribes and these religions that, where you talk to animals and you become animals, and you have a spirit animal, and those kind of things. And you have a shaman, lots and lots of stuff down there. If you grow up in that, you never know anything else. No evangelist ever comes to you and tells you about Christ or anything. So what do we do with you? That's kind of the postmodern question, because we know about you now. I mean, beforehand, we would send somebody to you, and there wasn't that many of you. Now it's like the whole world is filled with people who grow up and don't have the same religion, and they're doing the best they can. That's the idea. They're doing the best they can. They're the kids. They grow up, and their parents teach them this. So this is the reason why they do it, because they're in an isolated culture like we were before. They're third world. They're not like us. So what do we do with them? Well, the conservative church used to say, well, you got to get the gospel to them. That's it. That's the only way they can be saved. Well, how can they be saved? You get the gospel to them, and the gospel will save them. But now you have inclusivism, which says the belief that salvation is only through Christ, but Christ may be revealed in other religions. In other words, you have Christ's atonement being used in that situation, to where that person in the tribe grew up and never knew about Christ, but did the best he could, believed in God, believed they were sinful, believed that there was something they needed to do with their sin, right? Got this situation. And then we would say, but they never heard about Christ and they died. What happened? Well, as long as they cried out to God, God as they knew him, God will apply Christ's atonement. Therefore, Christ was their way to heaven. That is called inclusivism. Inclusivism, I think, is the most popular, the most growing trend in Christianity, and how Christianity is being affected by postmodernism. C.S. Lewis was an inclusivist, by the way, all the way back then, whenever you had the kind of worldwide culture opening up. Today in this time right now, I know this is going to disappoint you a whole lot. I'm not here to say whether or not inclusivism is right, give you the arguments for it, give you the arguments against it. It's a great class, and we will get way down the line. We will talk about that whenever we're in the subject of salvation or soteriology. But right now, I'm just telling you, here's what's going on. Here's postmodernism as we mix it in. And that's part of what we're trying to map everything. We're laying out a map of theology, where we've been, where we are, and not judging it yet, but just laying it all out there so that we can do well. That's the Through Theology in a Year. That's part of the integrity I'm trying to keep in this in this process. So you have the church responding in such a way. Notice this. This is Vatican II. This is a Vatican Council, the Roman Catholic Council. Vatican II in 1962 to 1965 had a council, and this is official Catholic dogma. This isn't just something they taught and it's they can change it. This is forever cemented, because whatever a council, an ecumenical council, this is the 21st ecumenical council according to Roman Catholics. Every one of them are authoritative, and this one says this about the plan of salvation. But the plan of salvation also includes those who acknowledge the Creator. Okay? Inclusivistic. In the first place, among those are the Muslims, that's how I spelled it, with professing to hold the same faith of Abraham, along with us adore the merciful God, who in the last day will judge mankind. Those can also obtain salvation, who through no fault of their own, there's the key, who through no fault of their own. Okay? As long as it's not your fault, you're good. Who through no fault of their own do not seek or know the gospel of Christ or his church, yet sincerely seek God, moved by grace, strive in their deeds to do his will as it is known to them through the dictates of conscience. Notice here, the biggest segment of the church today is inclusivistic. I'm not even saying whether I'm inclusivistic or not. I'm not saying whether that is right or wrong. I'm just saying this is what we are dealing with. This is the situation today. Now, next week, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the situation in the Protestant evangelical church and how it is affecting evangelicalism. It's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. Don't forget to come next time. Guys, thank you so much for showing up this time. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope this has been entertaining and informative for you. I hope that you share this. I hope that you tell other people about it. That is something that I need you to do. And I hope you go to my Patreon and become a patron. That would be really helpful for me. The more we get, the more we do this. I don't know if it's going to happen this year or next year, but we keep on moving forward. We'll build that base, and we're going to get this community really up and moving and, discussing these things. Right now, I'm just throwing this out here. Right now, I've started back up Theology Unplugged, and we actually used to be one of the most popular podcasts in Christianity from 2005 to 2014. I mean, incredibly popular. We had I don't know, I think 3 or 4 million downloads a year, which was a lot back then. Okay, not quite so much now, but it was a lot back then. But I'm trying to get this rebooted, restarted back up, and get going. We had to switch servers, so we have a whole new RSS feed, which knocked everybody out that followed us beforehand. But we have to start all over. So anyway, that's what we're doing. Share this. Tell everybody, hey, Theology Unplugged is going again. And hopefully they join us. I love you guys. I really do appreciate you showing up each time. It's great. I love teaching. I love this type of stuff. This is what I'm called to do, to teach theology. And I show up every day at 9 a.m. Central Time, or just listen to this later on. Thank you for being here, and I will see you next time.